All right, so get this. David Sachs, yeah, the PayPal guy, he's a key player now in setting U.S. policy on AI and cryptocurrency under President Trump. Talk about a plot twist, right?
It's definitely
We've
a
got news articles.
significant development,
Yeah,
market analyses, even some think tank reports diving into this. And let me tell you, things get pretty interesting.
especially considering the contrast between the Biden and Trump administration's approaches to these technologies.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so juicy. We're not just talking about like some policy wonk here. This is David Sachs, a tech titan,
Oh.
venture capitalist, that guy who's built his career on, disrupting the status quo.
And now he's in a position to disrupt the regulatory landscape for two of the most transformative technologies of our time.
Right. So first things first, let's talk about Sachs' vision for American tech. He's a big believer in deregulation, right? He thinks the government should basically step aside and just let the innovation engine, roar. That's right. He's argued that excessive regulation stifles creativity and hinders the development of groundbreaking technologies. He sees the U.S. as a leader in innovation and believes that maintaining that edge requires a light touch from the government.
Which sounds great on paper. But then you start digging a little deeper and you realize that Sachs also has like a hefty portfolio of investments in companies that stand to benefit big time from looser regulations. Talk about a potential conflict of interest.
That's the crux of the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the one hand, you have Sachs, a proven innovator, arguing that less government interference will lead to a flourishing tech sector.
Right.
On the other hand, you have critics raising concerns about whether he can truly separate his personal financial interests from the broader interests of the nation.
Yeah, it's like asking a fox to guard the henhouse. I mean, imagine being able to craft the rules for an entire industry while you also have a vested interest in how those rules play out. Makes you wonder if we're looking at a genuine push for innovation or a well-disguised power grab.
It's a question that policymakers and industry experts and even everyday citizens are grappling with.
Right.
And the answer is far from clear-cut. There are valid arguments to be made on both sides.
And then there's the whole Bitcoin thing. Remember when Bitcoin blasted past $100,000 right after Sachs' appointment was announced? That wasn't a coincidence, was it?
It certainly suggests that the market saw Sachs' appointment as a positive signal. Investors, particularly those in the cryptocurrency space, likely interpreted his pro-deregulation stance as a sign that the U.S. was about to become a much more crypto-friendly environment.
So did Sachs single-handedly spark a Bitcoin boom? Or was this just a case of speculative frenzy fueled by hype and uncertainty?
It's probably a bit of both.
Mhm.
The truth is, the cryptocurrency market is incredibly volatile. It's susceptible to all sorts of external factors, from regulatory changes to media coverage to even social media trends. Sachs' appointment likely created a wave of optimism, but whether that translates into sustained growth remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's like trying to predict the weather, right? You can see the clouds gathering, but you never know for sure if it's going to be like a drizzle or a downpour.
Precisely. And that unpredictability is part of what makes this whole situation so fascinating.
For sure.
We're essentially watching a high-stakes experiment unfold in real time.
Okay, so we've got a powerful tech figure, strong belief in deregulation, who also happens to have a lot to gain personally from a less regulated tech landscape. And we've got a cryptocurrency market that's reacting like a caffeine-fueled teenager to every whisper of news. Where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
Well, I think it's important to step back and look at the broader debate surrounding Sachs' appointment.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about potential conflicts of interest or market fluctuations. It's about fundamental questions regarding the role of government, the future of American innovation, and the balance between progress and protection.
Yeah, and the sources we've got here highlight some pretty weighty concerns, like what happens to consumer protection if we prioritize innovation at all costs? Are we going to see a rollback of regulations that are designed to safeguard our privacy and security online?
That's a key question that lawmakers and regulators are grappling with.
Yeah.
And it's a question that directly impacts you as well. Think about the data you share online every day. Your browsing history, your location, your financial information. Who gets to access that data? How is it used? These are questions that become even more crucial in a deregulated environment.
Right. It's like the Wild West out there, right? Except instead of cowboys and outlaws, we've got tech giants and algorithms battling it out for our data.
And the rules of engagement are still being written.
So amidst all this uncertainty, what exactly is Sachs' mandate? I mean, what specific powers does he have to shape the future of AI and cryptocurrency in the U.S.?
His role is basically to craft the regulatory framework for both AI and cryptocurrency. So that means he has the power to shape everything from data privacy standards to the rules governing how cryptocurrencies are traded and taxed.
Wow, that's a lot of power for one person. So if
Yeah.
he's a champion of deregulation, does that mean he's just gonna like strip away all existing regulations and let these industries just run wild?
Not necessarily.
Hmm.
Deregulation doesn't always mean a complete absence of rules. It can also mean simplifying existing regulations, streamlining approval processes, or even creating more flexible frameworks that allow for innovation while still providing some level of oversight.
So it's more about finding that like right balance
Sure.
between fostering innovation and protecting consumers,
Mm.
between encouraging growth and preventing abuse.
Exactly. And that's where things get tricky, because striking that balance requires a nuanced understanding of both the technology and the potential risks involved. It also requires the ability to resist pressure from industry lobbyists who might be pushing for regulations that benefit their bottom line at the expense of the public good.
Yeah, it sounds like a tightrope walk. So how do we, as, informed citizens, make sense of all this? What are the key things we should be paying attention to as Sachs begins to shape the regulatory landscape?
I think one crucial area to watch is how he addresses the issue of data privacy. As AI becomes more sophisticated, it relies increasingly on vast amounts of data. That data often includes personal information about you and me, our online behavior, our purchasing habits, our location data, even our facial images.
Right, and right now there's like a lot of debate about who owns that data, how it can be used, and what safeguards are in place to protect our privacy.
Right. And Sachs's approach to data privacy regulations will have a major impact on how AI develops and how it's used in our lives. If he favors a more hands-off approach, we could see companies collecting and using our data with fewer restrictions.
Which, I mean, that could be great for companies looking to develop like new products and services, but it could also leave consumers feeling like vulnerable and exposed. It's like walking around with your entire life history on display for anyone to see.
That's a good analogy. And it highlights the potential trade-offs we face as we navigate this new technological landscape. More data can lead to better AI, but it also raises concerns about privacy and control.
Okay, so what about cryptocurrency? What kind of impact could Sachs have on that market?
Well, right now, the cryptocurrency market is largely unregulated. That's part of its appeal for some investors. They see it as like a decentralized system, free from government interference. But it also makes it kind of a breeding ground for scams, fraud, and market manipulation.
So Sachs could like bring some much needed order to the Wild West of crypto.
He certainly could. By establishing clear rules and regulations, he could help to legitimize the cryptocurrency market, making it more attractive to institutional investors and everyday consumers.
But wouldn't that also go against the whole like ethos of cryptocurrency, which
Yeah.
is all about decentralization and freedom from government control?
That's the dilemma. Too much regulation could stifle innovation and drive away the early adopters who have been the driving force behind cryptocurrency's growth. But too little regulation could leave the market vulnerable to collapse, potentially harming millions of investors.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, that, Goldilocks zone where regulation provides enough stability to foster confidence without stifling the creativity and dynamism that make these technologies so exciting.
Precisely. And that's no easy feat. It requires a deep understanding of the technology, a keen awareness of the potential risks and rewards, and a willingness to engage in thoughtful dialogue with all stakeholders.
Speaking of thoughtful dialogue, let's talk about one of the most controversial aspects of Sachs' mandate, his focus on protecting free speech in the context of, like, big tech companies. This is a particularly thorny issue because it gets to the heart of how we define free speech in the digital age.
It does. And it forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions about the power of these tech giants and their role in shaping public discourse. On the one hand, we have these platforms that have become essential for communication and information sharing. But on the other hand, we're increasingly aware of the potential for these platforms to be used to spread misinformation, hate speech, and harmful content.
So where do you, like, draw the line? How do you balance the right to free speech with the need to protect individuals from harm? And who gets to decide where that line is drawn?
These are questions that societies around the world are grappling with, and there are no easy answers. Sachs's background suggests that he leans towards a more hands-off approach, prioritizing free speech over content moderation.
But isn't that a bit like saying, let the bullies run wild in the schoolyard? I mean, shouldn't there be some rules in place to protect people from harassment and abuse and, the spread of dangerous falsehoods?
That's the argument that many people are making. They argue that allowing harmful content to proliferate unchecked can have real-world consequences, leading to violence, discrimination, and the erosion of trust in democratic institutions.
But others argue that any attempt to regulate content online is, like, a slippery slope towards censorship. They say that even well-intentioned efforts to remove harmful content can easily be abused to silence dissenting voices and stifle legitimate debate.
It's a complex issue with no easy solutions. And Sachs's approach to this challenge will have a profound impact on the online landscape. It could shape everything from the way we consume news to the way we interact with each other online. It could even influence the outcome of elections and the future of democracy itself.
So how do we navigate this minefield? How do we ensure that the internet remains a space for free expression while also protecting individuals from harm?
It requires kind of a multifaceted approach. It requires tech companies to take more responsibility for the content that's shared on their platforms. It requires governments to develop clear and consistent regulations that strike a balance between free speech and public safety. And it requires all of us as individuals to be more discerning consumers of information, to think critically about what we see and read online, and to engage in respectful dialogue with those who hold different views.
It sounds like we're all in this together, whether we like it or not.
We are. The internet has become an integral part of our lives, and the decisions we make about how it's governed will have far-reaching consequences for all of us.
Okay, so we've talked about Sachs' vision for American tech, his potential conflicts of interest, his impact on the cryptocurrency market, and his stance on free speech. But this is a global story, right? I mean, the U.S. isn't the only player in this game.
You're absolutely right. And that brings us to the global implications of Sachs's appointment. Because his actions won't just shape the American tech landscape. They'll also have ripple effects around the world, particularly as the U.S. competes with other nations, like China, for dominance in these key technologies.
Yeah, so we've got this, like, tech showdown brewing between the U.S. and China, and it feels like Sachs is, holding a few of the cards for the U.S. team. What's China's game plan when it comes to AI and crypto? I mean, they're not exactly known for their laissez-faire approach, right?
That's right. China has adopted a much more centralized approach. Think of it as a kind of guided innovation, where the government sets strategic priorities and directs resources towards specific technological advancements. They've poured billions into AI research and development and implementation, with a focus on areas like, facial recognition, surveillance technology, and even social credit systems.
Okay, so China's playing chess while the U.S. might be playing poker. Like, more control, long-term strategy, maybe a little less individual freedom in the mix. That's a pretty stark contrast.
It is. And it raises some interesting questions about which approach will ultimately prove more effective. The U.S. model, with its emphasis on individual initiative and private sector investment, has historically been a powerful engine for innovation.
Right.
But China's more coordinated approach might give them an advantage in rapidly scaling up these technologies and integrating them into their society.
So for a listener who's trying to, make sense of all this, what are the real-world implications of this tech rivalry? Does it mean our phones are going to be spying on us in Mandarin soon? Or that Bitcoin will be replaced by, some digital yuan?
It's not quite that dramatic, but think about it this way. The technologies that emerge from this competition will shape the global landscape in profound ways. They'll determine who controls the flow of information, who sets the standards for digital commerce, and even who has the upper hand in areas like cybersecurity and national defense.
So it's not just about who has the fastest internet or the coolest gadgets. It's about who has the power to, shape the rules of the game in the digital age.
Exactly. And for the average person, that translates into choices we make every day. The apps we use, the devices we buy, the online services we rely on. Are we going to be living in a world dominated by American tech giants, or will Chinese companies like Huawei and Tencent become the new global powerhouses?
It's almost like choosing sides in a, global tech war, except we're not choosing with guns and tanks, but with our wallets and our data.
And that's the reality we're facing. This competition is already playing out in subtle ways. Take 5G technology, for example. The U.S. and China are locked in a fierce battle for dominance in this field because whoever controls 5G will have a significant advantage in developing and deploying the next generation of AI and other data-intensive technologies.
So while we're busy arguing about privacy settings on our smartphones, there's this much bigger game unfolding behind the scenes. A game with potentially huge consequences for the global balance of power.
And it's a game that's still very much in play. The outcome is far from certain. It will depend on a multitude of factors. Government policies, technological breakthroughs, even cultural attitudes towards technology.
So if we circle back to David Sachs, his role in all this becomes even more significant, right? He's not just shaping the future of American tech, he's potentially shaping the global landscape for years to come.
That's right. And the decisions he makes, the regulations he puts in place, will have ripple effects far beyond U.S. borders. They could determine whether the U.S. maintains its technological edge or whether China emerges as the new global leader in AI and cryptocurrency.
Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've gone from David Sachs's appointment to the intricacies of deregulation, from the volatility of Bitcoin to the global tech rivalry between the U.S. and China. It's been a whirlwind tour of the forces shaping the future of technology. And I don't know about you, but my head is spinning a little.
It's certainly a lot to absorb. But the key takeaway here is that technology is not developing in a vacuum. It's intertwined with politics, economics, and even cultural values. And as we move further into this era of rapid technological advancement, it's more important than ever to be informed and engaged in these conversations.
Absolutely. We can't just sit back and passively consume the latest gadgets and gizmos. We need to understand the forces that are shaping these technologies, the choices that are being made, and the potential consequences for our lives and our societies.
The future is not predetermined. It's being shaped right now by the decisions we make, the actions we take, and the conversations we have.
Right.
So stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged, because the future of technology is ultimately up to all of us.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit unsettling. Because sometimes a little bit of unsettling is exactly what we need to shake things up and start thinking differently about the world around us.